Post it now.
Yes, I'm currently recording. It still says joining for Josephine. So.
Is it still saying joining?
Yeah, it still says
God,
joining. I'm just doing some Googling. Why would it still say joining? And because she's not in the room, I can't message her yet to see.
Can you like kick her out and
I can't do
you can't do
anything
that.
to her.
That's fine.
Yeah, like because she's not in the waiting room or in the meeting.
Right.
So I mean, we can get started, and if I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and see if because now she's gone. So hopefully she'll pop back in.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started because depending on how much we end up talking, this could go long, may go short if we all are in agreement or whatever. I'm gonna call the November 2nd meeting of the Long Range Planning Committee to order at 1:36 p.m. Beth, can you do the roll call, please?
Brown.
Here.
Danzig Lyons.
Here.
Leffler.
Here.
Lemmer. Catherine, I think you're muted. I can see her.
No.
There we go. Thank you, Catherine. Lemke.
Here.
Martins. McNulty. Shepherd. And Tucci.
As we discussed just a few minutes ago, we do have a quorum. Oh, there's Josephine. So I guess, Josephine, if you can hear us, we're just going through roll call, so you haven't missed anything.
Sorry, it took a long time to connect for some reason.
Yeah, that's what Rebecca was saying as well. Okay.
Indicate also present is Rebecca Malinowski and Beth Stubborn, CCS. Sorry about that.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda? Any public comment? I don't think there's anyone else here, but so the first order of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting, October 5th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. It's Karen.
Second?
Second.
From Sarah. Any discussion, questions, changes to the minutes? No. Okay, hearing none.
I'll go ahead and do a roll.
Yep, thanks.
Brown.
Here.
Danzig Lyons.
Aye.
Leffler.
Yes.
Lemmer. Lemke.
Abstained, since I missed it.
And Tucci.
Here. Yes. Sorry, I'm sidetracked.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're actually into the meat of the meeting, the strategic planning process. Rebecca did resend some information for today's minutes. There was the links to the needs assessment surveys that we did and the data analysis that CCS staff did. I think we could probably talk about these things all together. So, the first, and then, point B is to draft the mission and vision. I know also that Rebecca and her staff put together what the current mission and vision, kind of some notes on the governing board discussion, which we had when the full governing board met, and I think she did a good job of kind of pulling the key points out of that discussion. So thank you, Rebecca, because I didn't feel like it was as I didn't feel like we ended up with as many ideas as you've managed to pull out of there. So that was it was good that someone else did that. And then our current mission and vision, and then some suggested changes to those based on the themes that came out of the data analysis that was done. So any discussions about the needs assessment? I think we've kind of talked about that a lot, but now that we've had a chance to sit with it, having gone through the governing board discussion, is there any other thoughts on those, on the needs analysis or needs assessment? Yeah, the fact that it kind of points to some areas we need to focus on. Okay. So obviously then drafting the mission and vision, did everyone have a chance to look at the notes that Rebecca sent and some of her suggested, either the mission and the vision and some of the strategic directions that we might want to look at? So Rebecca, did you want to talk a little bit more about this, or how do you want us to proceed?
I mean, I think what I took away from governing board is that CCS should maintain the very strong focus that we have on the ILS and those services that tie in really closely. So from my perspective, working on the mission and vision, I was trying to make them a little bit more readable and kind of separate them a little bit. I feel like before the mission and the vision were very similar. So I was trying to make the mission like what we're striving to do, and then the vision, what that would look like in the future when we're successful. So my staff and I met, and we did some brainstorming on language, and then I took their language and kind of shuffled it around and came up with some suggestions here. And I really intended these as a jumping off point. So I'm happy to have discussions about what is and is not included here, and to start improving these and narrowing it down.
So I guess we'll start, obviously we know what our current mission is, and then what are people's thoughts about the suggested mission statement. Obviously Rebecca and her staff are looking for some guidance from us, whether or not we think this is a good, as she said, a jumping off point. Do we need to wordsmith this? Anyone's thoughts?
Rebecca, could you share that PowerPoint on the screen so we're all looking?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Are we good on that?
Yep.
Okay.
So you can see the current mission statement, themes that came out of the needs assessment, and then as I said earlier, or said a few minutes ago, the suggested mission statement that was put together by Rebecca and her staff. I will note that on first reading, I quite liked the suggested mission statement. I thought it struck a good balance between this discussion that we've been having about CCS as a utility, versus CCS as a cooperative. And I thought this has kind of combined both of those things that I think most of us felt pretty strongly about. So just like I said on the first pass, I quite liked this. So.
Yeah, I did too. But I think the one that we currently are using is more poetic, but I don't know that being poetic is necessarily what we're after here. No, I thought that it did a good job of combining the elements that we want to be sure that we hit. And even though our goal as an organization from the last plan is to have patrons as the North Star, patron experience as the North Star, it's still the job of CCS mostly to work with the members. So I liked the way it was structured too.
Yeah, I liked the inclusion of the patron experience in there. I thought that was important because I think that did come out of the needs assessment that, you know, this is a very, CCS has to work with the members, as Susan said, but we do need to think about our patron experience. So I was glad that was included. Anyone else? Karen.
I liked the suggested mission statement as well, and I'm about to do something that I hate when it's done to me, which is try and edit with the group. But I'm wondering if we could drop in the word provide high quality and equitable future-focused library technology. I think equity and equity of service and equity of access is important, and if that's not where it goes, that's fine, but I think we would be missing an opportunity if we didn't somehow show that we're aware that equity of service is an issue. Perhaps in some of our cities more than others, but certainly in Evanston.
So just kind of a point of order, I guess, then, Rebecca. I mean, are you looking for us to come out of here with the wordsmithed mission statement, then to get feedback on that from governing board, or?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if we all agree on like the concepts, like if everyone says, yes, we want to put something about equity in the mission statement, I'd be happy to work on the wording of that. If we say, yes, we definitely want like these words that are in there and also add this other theme or take out this theme, I'm happy to work on that outside. If I think that would probably be easier for everyone, and then send for a review.
Okay, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if you want us to actually wordsmith now or just get the general idea and then we'll do that, or have you and your staff at least have the first go round with that. Okay. I like that, Karen, especially because I think further down, maybe it's in the, I don't know, one of these we do, there is discussion about does equity need to be considered when we're looking at increasing membership or, you know, recruiting members for CCS. And so I think that, you know, to include it in the mission statement is also important.
Pam, do you see Catherine's hand? I don't know what your screen set up.
Everyone. So, Catherine? We can't hear you, Catherine. So I don't know if you're.
I just reflect that I would also be highly supportive of Karen's suggestion.
My feeling is that most of us probably, well, actually, I don't want to speak for everyone else. So does anyone not believe that this should be part of the mission statement? I guess maybe that's a better way to get your guys' feedback on that. I mean, do you feel that this is an appropriate place to include this? Do we think it's important enough for inclusion in this whole process at all? I think that we agree that it is, but do we need to include this in some way in the mission statement? Do you think we shouldn't? I guess.
Sarah has a hand up, and then Susan was also raising her hand.
My apologies, because I can't see everyone. So, so Sarah, if you want to go first, and then Susan.
Thank you. Yes, I agree about the equitability. I also love how you summarized. There's a lot of thought behind all of these. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys put into them. I will say, is there anything about cost effectiveness? Is that intended for the mission or for, because I remember from governing board that coming up a lot, whether that's a mission or in the vision statement, but something about cost effectiveness.
Yes.
And that is actually part of the current mission statement. They do, it says cost-effective library technology, so.
Yeah, and I had it in some of the alternates, and I think I was like, oh, there's so many words, but absolutely that can be adjusted.
So the thing that is giving me pause just a little bit is I didn't hear a lot of talk about that at governing board. I think, and I think it's a serious thing to consider. If we do start bringing in smaller libraries that need our support, that will have a financial impact on the organization as a whole. And I guess I'd feel a little better about making it part of our mission, which is that's a huge thing to me. I mean, like if we're going to put it there, we have to take that seriously. I personally would 100% advocate for that, but I'm not sure we heard that from the entire group, and I'm a little uncomfortable putting it there. I wonder if that would be a thing to bring up with the group.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I will jump in. I agree with you, Susan. I was thinking about this a lot, more in terms of kind of, bringing in new members and, is there an equity component to that? And while I think there were some libraries that were really strongly in favor of this, and like you said, I mean, that felt that kind of our role as just librarians in general is to support, maybe some of our lesser fortunate, colleagues and surrounding communities and that kind of thing. But I do agree that we didn't hear that from everyone. And I would venture to say that there might be some people that would argue against that, not because of an equity viewpoint, but just this idea that do people feel they can make those, sell that to their boards if they've got boards that are kind of heavily, invested in making sure that we're not using our dollars to support a lesser supported library. So maybe, obviously it's an important concept, and I do think that maybe we need to, where cost effective seems really straightforward and not something that we might necessarily need to discuss. Certainly the equity of service, we probably do need to bring up at governing board and talk about what that looks like. And, is it bringing in smaller libraries? Is it, hiring diverse staff? I mean, what exactly does equity and equity of service mean for us as a consortium? Any other thoughts on?
Catherine, I think you can probably just jump in when you.
Yeah, don't, because I don't see everyone, so my apologies.
The word effective doesn't need the word cost with it, right? Because I never talk about efficient use of resources, I talk about effective use of resources. So if our plan is to provide effective, high quality resources, the idea of either cost, some sort of measurement is built into the word effective. That's just, I think cost effective is not necessarily, because there's many factors that go into determining whether something's effective. You're not going to list them all, so why list cost?
I think that's reasonable. And I think from my perspective, when, I was working on this, like, it's sort of similar when it comes to high quality. Like, what does high quality mean? It means you're getting a good value for your money. Like, it may or may not be the lowest cost option, but you're getting what you pay for and not paying too much for a subpar service, or again, just using a subpar service for the sake of cost. So I would agree with that sentiment, Catherine.
Does everyone else agree with that as well? Or they feel strongly, or do any of you feel strongly that we need to have cost, the word cost in there?
I think a word effective, I hear what she's saying about it encapsulating that point, and so I do agree.
I think that it casts a wide umbrella, and if during the discussion people feel strongly about putting cost in, we'll hear it loud and clear. I'm just reflecting that let's just forecast some future date when we're not all buttoned down with COVID and we turn back and we look at this. I just feel we want something that's going to stand the test of time. And so I'm glad that we're going to have the discussion about equity and equity of access and service as part of that discussion. But at this point, are we ready to say the next step is to bring it up to the full board after we hash it through one more time?
Can I just add one quick thing? We keep talking about equity as in support of lesser funded institutions. And I think that equity is, you know, equity is a broader thing than that. Maybe it's adding some sort of, I'm not familiar with the technology, but maybe it's some sort of way that Polaris gets read to people who can't see. Like equity is a big range of words, and we keep talking about it in a very narrow way of subsidizing smaller economic libraries, which is my fault because I threw that into the mix. But I also say that I think if our goal is to just keep this as broad as possible without it losing meaning, then it's good that we use big words that have many ways. Right now, all of us are focused on EDI as in terms of race and socioeconomic status, but equity is also, everything. Big buttons on your computers for people who can't see and all of that.
I completely agree, Catherine, and it's in providing services and access to our technology in different languages. It's people with different literacy rates access information, and it certainly could include how we support new or existing members who have funding challenges, but it's also racial equity.
If the committee is comfortable, I would recommend that, like, in the next draft, equity is included in the mission statement, as is effective. And then if governing board wants to take it out, then governing board can take it out. Does that feel reasonable?
I think so, because I think it makes the most sense to have it in the mission statement, because going back to Catherine's point that it means so many different things depending on what strategic direction we're talking about or what particular objective we're talking about. So to have it in our mission statement kind of says, overall, we're committed to this idea, which means different things depending on what we're doing. And so I think that, at least from where I'm sitting, I'm totally fine with that, because I think that, again, that's kind of the overarching umbrella that we're working under.
Oh, and Diane just is joining us also.
Yeah, I'm fine with including it and just seeing what governing board thinks. I think it would be good to explain it. I think you can't just like drop it out there, because it's hard to say anything that would be in opposition to it. That would feel terrible. So, yeah, I think as long as we explain what it's intended to be a larger umbrella and not, as Catherine says, just the narrow concept of supporting other smaller libraries and things like that, that would be great. I would also just like to make a plea for trying not to use EDI in this context, because we already use EDI in CCS to mean something completely different. And it brings my brain to a crashing halt every time.
Any other comments regarding the suggested mission statement? I think it sounds like we all in general really like the statement that Rebecca and her staff have put together, with obviously some points of discussion that will have to be made with the governing board. But do we feel like we're comfortable kind of moving on in terms of that we feel like this probably, or something very similar to this, will be our mission statement, and that we're ready to move on to some strategic directions, perhaps? Or do we feel like we still need to?
Thumbs up and some thoughts.
Yeah, okay. And then, or at least not strategic directions yet, but the vision statement, because we kind of, you know, parsed out the mission statement and the vision statement. Everyone has had a chance to look at it. And anyone's thoughts, or Rebecca, do you want to give any background about the development of this, or do you think you've kind of said it?
The suggested and the alternate, I think, kind of take two different perspectives. One starts out with patrons and one starts out with the member organizations and what the members provide to patrons and how we support them in doing it. And these, I feel like, were both, I was trying to not just like repeat the mission statement again. I don't think that's the point. But I'm very interested in feedback on this, and it looks like Sarah Brown has her hand raise icon up.
Well, once again, I thought you did an excellent job summarizing all of the various themes that came up through all of it, which is very hard to do. I would just say, to me, the vision statement could just use a little bit of editing. It just seems a little long to me for the vision statement. And then the only word that I really wanted to see was expert or expertise, because I know we rely on your expertise as part of the access that we get through CCS. And I don't know what we would do without your expertise. So to me, that's just, but otherwise I thought all the ideas were there. I just wanted it a little bit trimmed down.
This is Diane. First off, I apologize for being late. We had some election issues here. But if you wanted to shorten it, we have to say patrons of member libraries. Can it be just provide seamless, convenient access?
I think maybe we should take a step back and talk about, as Rebecca said she'd be interested in hearing, where we feel this vision statement should kind of come from. As she said, the first one is a little bit more patron focused. And then the alternate is a little bit more member focused. So does anyone have any thoughts about where we feel the vision statement should be focused? Or is there a way to, if we feel that they're of equal weight, do we combine these in some way? But maybe we ought to talk about what we think the focus of the vision statement should be.
This is Catherine. I sort of feel I'm in Sarah's camp with this, not like we're drawing lines and stepping behind them. But when I read these over, I felt there was a lack of sort of boom, like get us, because having just gone through all of this with some kind of leadership guru about what a mission statement is, I mean, what a vision statement is, and the vision is your horizon. Like, what do you want to be at some point? Like, what does everything that you do get you there? And so from my perspective, which could be totally wrong, is that the vision should be the vision of CCS. What is you as this collective institution want to do for your constituents? Not what, like, I feel like it's my vision to provide extraordinary world-class concierge service, whatever it is, right? And I feel like that, but again, I'm looking at whose mission and whose vision is this? The mission seems to me make sense, but the vision seems not to speak from the institution of CCS.
Can I just add something real quick? We just finished our strategic plan, and under vision, we had that the vision statement is what we aspire to achieve in our community, while the mission is how we carry out our work to achieve our vision.
And again, not trying to have a group wordsmith, but I would hope that when we're done with the vision, it's more aspirational. And I agree with Sarah and Catherine and Diane that it's future and aspirational, and not so much the detail of how we're going to get where we're going, but where is it we want to go.
Yeah, it's because the activities to the goals get us where we're going. So we need to have that vision out there in the future where we want to be.
So could it be the last sentence of the suggested? CCS is on the forefront of library technology and adapts to changing needs and environments. I mean, is that enough?
That's a thought I had right before you said that, Karen. I agree that I think that last statement, that last sentence is really powerful, and maybe we need to tweak that just a little bit. I feel like that it encompasses that aspirational feeling that we're all, that we want. Any other thoughts on that? What does everyone else think about that?
Yeah, I like that. The first one was bothering me a little in that it was sort of three separate things, but that last sentence does just kind of capture the whole thing together. So I like that a lot.
I mean, we can get T-shirts with that on it.
I agree. I think that one sentence says it all.
So maybe, Rebecca, that's what we start with as, proposing to governing board and see what kind of feedback we get.
That works for me.
Look at how quickly we're moving through everything.
Loving it.
Actually, it's kudos to Rebecca and her staff doing kind of the hard work here. So, I echo all the other thanks here, but you've done a really great job of pulling together some really disparate ideas and what didn't feel as focused a discussion as you've written it up as. So that's great. So moving on then, I think, unless anyone has anything else to say about the vision or mission before we move on to the strategic directions that we want to focus on. No? Okay. So you can see the previously suggested themes of our strategic directions. Some of the suggested ones that have come out of some of, again, the needs assessments, and then how does long-term planning factor into all of this? I know that was a big discussion at governing board as well. So Rebecca, are you just looking for these kinds of, just the themes from us right now? I mean, do you have specific objectives that you want us to tie these to, or your staff will work on that? How do you?
Yeah, I'd like some feedback on the specific themes before my team starts working on like objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a big component, or I don't know, we talked last time about like, what resources do we need to like do the work. On these suggested themes, I feel really confident that we can do work in these themes with the resources that we have now. And then maybe there's some like stretch goals that we would, say if we wanted to like add a staff member, which I am not suggesting that we do, not suggesting that. I think that the themes that are here, it's like, yes, we can work on these. My staff will work on some targets for review at the next meeting at the end of November. But I don't want to get them started on targets or specific activities without some guidance.
Okay. Thank you. So the previous suggested themes are from previously suggested when? Before the governing board meeting?
Yeah, so these were from the last long range planning meeting committee that we had when we only still had like a third of respondents
Okay,
on
so these
the,
are
on the
older
survey.
ones. Okay.
Mhm. So, I mean, they're not super different. I think, you know, where I had originally said develop CCS reputation within the library industry, I took that out and then added identify new opportunities for enhancement or development of core ILS services to kind of stick with that future focused and future forecasting, but also still being focused on that ILS experience. Like, I don't know how helpful it is for CCS to say like, oh, the new trend in library buildings is for everyone to have, I don't know what that would be. I don't hang out in library buildings, but just to kind of narrow down that future focused and trend zone to like what we know. And Susan Lemke, are you cool with DEI instead of EDI?
Yep, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. I don't want your brain to stop working.
We just worked so hard on EDI here.
I
that
know.
It will forever be one thing to me.
Yeah.
Fair.
So, does anyone have any thoughts about the suggested themes? Do we feel like we can, let me take a step back, talking about brains not working, mine is just off today, so my apologies completely. Do we feel that the suggested themes kind of mirror or get to what we're trying to do with the mission and vision as we've discussed? You know, keeping in mind that depending on what comes out of governing board, some of those may have to change, but in terms of what we agree is on as a committee.
Sarah Brown has a hand raise icon.
Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I thought that once again, you did an excellent job, you know, aggregating all the information. I put the link in there for the Jefferson County Library Cooperative Mission and Vision. And while I didn't think all of it really applied to CCS, there was some things where I thought they went bigger in terms of their goals. And so when you got down to the objectives, some of what we have as suggested themes are objectives. So just as like a point of reference more than anything else, it's something to look at. Oh, thank you. But
Thank
some
you.
of it, you know, it doesn't apply because it looks like they're much.
You kind of cut out at the end there, Sarah, but. I feel like our themes kind of are what maybe they're calling their guiding principles on the Jefferson
Yes.
County.
Yeah, thank you for summarizing that. Yes, I was just, but I like, yeah, some of this didn't apply, but it was very interesting to see it kind of, when someone's already kind of worked through their own, it's always like, aha, how can we utilize that? So just as a point of reference, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I like their wording for goal number 2. I feel like that is what I'm saying instead of identify new opportunities for enhancement / development of core ILS services. One of them does sound more aspirational than the other.
Well, I was gonna say the number 2 is the one I like the most, so that's,
Yeah.
but that's what I keep gravitating to because they look like they're sharing a lot more. But so anyways, but just as a point, and I like number 5, and number 4 in terms of, but the other 2 I didn't think. The collection development, I don't know that that's something, and then number 1 I didn't think. I like that it had the fiscal component, but it sounds like they're looking at grants and looking at all other stuff, so I don't know, that may not be.
Yeah, I guess I have 2 questions for the committee. I mean, obviously talking about costs and making things making things manageable for libraries and reasonable and making sure we're getting good value. I do feel like that's part of everything that CCS does and should be doing. but it is not in the strategic directions here. To me, it's just like, I don't want to pay too much for something that I shouldn't pay too much for. So one question would be, is that a problem for anyone, or do you want to see things written differently? And then, so in both the previously suggested themes and our current suggested themes, I have help libraries use data effectively. And, it comes up over and over again in meetings and, in day-to-day conversations with staff and directors. It wasn't a huge theme in the actual needs assessment data, but I don't know how much of that was just the way I wrote the survey. So to me, that's something that was in our previous strategic plan. I feel like it's the area where we still have the most work to do from our previous plan. So I feel really comfortable carrying it through. But I just want to point out to the committee that I'm not sure that that popped up in the data as much as in our experiences.
I do think it's important to address cost in some way. We've kind of taken it out of one place. And it's not going to be important to every library, definitely, but I think looking to the future here, because of the pandemic and the downturn in the economy, there may be libraries that are really start to struggle to make their CCS payments. And, ever since we went to quarterly billing, and I knew this was going to happen, I get slammed once every quarter by my one trustee who does not see a value to these things. And I just think that it is important that it be included. I don't think you can, at this point, leave that out when we're looking at such a kind of bleak horizon temporarily here. It needs to be, just that we do try to provide good value, but it can't be good value in terms of adding more services and the cost creeps up. It has to be more, keeping the cost contained. And I certainly think we heard that from Jeannie, and we always hear that from Round Lake. I think there are other places where it's definitely going to be a concern.
Yeah, and I would agree. When I was writing flexible and responsive services, to me, it can certainly be part of that. We're, flexible in terms of do we do more opt-in services like the collection HQ group buy? Responsive certainly is responsive to member needs. And if those member needs are to keep costs down, that's what it is. But I do also see value in specifically saying, we're talking about money. So I could really go either way on that. So I hear you, Susan.
Is there a way to add something about just fiscal responsibility in general? I mean, as another theme or a principle, whatever we want to call it.
I think that you can talk about fiscal responsibility, and I think that many people who oversee our work, whether it's our library boards or our city councils or our voters, when you use the words fiscal responsibility, it also implies that at some point you're not going to have to come and ask for a bailout. So I think that the words fiscal responsibility also, if CCS as an institution is fiscally responsible, as its own entity is fiscally responsible, that tells me as one of the constituents that would have to bail you out that you didn't just randomly do something that gutted your treasury and now I have to come up with an extra 10,000 or 20,000, right? I mean, it's extraordinary thinking, but in these times it's not really. So what I would expect as a constituent member is that CCS would say, one of our tenets is fiscal responsibility. So for instance, if we know that 3 of our libraries cannot make their quarterly payment on time because of a delay in their taxes, right? This year, all my taxes are delayed by 4 months. what happens if I can't make my payment? Can you continue operations? I think that's what I see as important from the fiscal responsibility discussion, which is, I think, a little different than you saying you're always going to drive to the lowest dollar, because driving to the lowest dollar from a vendor is not always the best deal. So I think it's two pieces of the same question. But I jumped in on that. But I have, if anyone, I also have a comment about the data. So I'll wait if anybody wants to talk more about the money part.
This is Diane, and I think part of the whole strategic membership growth, there needs to be a factor in there of retaining current membership as well. And that kind of goes along with the fiscal and the possibility that someone can't maintain. So maybe there's some intertwining there.
And this is Karen again. The whole notion of fiscal responsibility is a function of short and long-term decisions. I don't remember how quickly that lease is coming up for renewal.
2023.
And so I think that's a really good example of long-term fiscal responsibility or lack thereof. By not making sure that all of the original caveats in that lease, and I know it was in there because I read it in an earlier version where there was an early out clause and there were ways to adjust things if the needs of the square footage changed, and somehow, somewhere that was taken out, and we're living with the results.
I agree with all of these statements. I feel like I need to go read 1,000 strategic plans. So my question is fiscal responsibility in the way that Karen and Catherine are talking about, like appropriate management of CCS as an agency, is that something that belongs in a strategic plan, or that's something that is like the expectation of, like the job expectations of the executive director and the responsibility of the board on an ongoing basis to make sure we're being a responsible agency? Or is that, I don't feel like we're in a place where we need to fix something. Like, you know, the auditors come in and he's like, oh boy, like things are a mess. You don't have any reserves. Like, to answer Catherine's hypothetical question, we do have reserves. If every library didn't pay, we could, you know, carry on for at least a quarter, but really closer to a full year, if nobody paid us anything and we didn't get any breaks from vendors. And we didn't like manage, again, to like cut any other costs. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be in here. I'm asking if it's like, it's one thing if we're talking about, you know, making services, creating services that are affordable and attractive and valuable, and keeping costs down in response to like the environment that we live in with COVID. Like that to me all makes sense to be in a strategic plan, whereas like be a responsible organization to me doesn't feel like a strategic plan goal, but just of like a general expectation to not run your agency into the ground.
Rebecca, I think you make a really good point. I know probably all of us are going through our annual audit right now with our financial policies. I know that, you know, GASB 54 for district libraries and what all of the different assigned and unassigned funds and the expectations, our bylaws. So that is a really good point.
I agree in that the fiscal part should be in our bylaws and policy, because we should have a fiscal policy.
We do.
So that's where that part should be, and maybe just leave it there.
So I think it might be, I'm looking at the plan that Sarah had sent, and this is under their guiding principles, that we practice fiscally responsible stewardship of member library resources, which I like the way that that's worded, but again, that doesn't address the broader question, is that, do we want to include something like that in our strategic plan? And I'm not hearing a kind of definitive answer to that. I kind of feel like I would like to see some mention of this in the plan, but again, this may be one of those areas that we have to get more feedback from governing board on.
I would agree with Pam that I think a little bit of strategic plan is always optics, right? And so if you have a board from a potential library wants to join, and they say, look at this is this great organization. They do all these things, and one of their tenets of the way they do business is to consider every decision in terms of its of the importance of its financial, long-term, short-term, whatever you want to call it. I think that there's a certain amount of optics with having it in your strategic plan. It's not, to me, it's like not akin to saying every decision we're gonna evaluate every decision in terms of environmental sustainability. Like, some libraries have that. Like, we have a drift towards environmental sustainability. I think that's always an add-on of something, but I think strategically, I think it brings a lot of comfort to the optics of the situation to say that you manage our money wisely. But that's just, again, I try and look at things from like my board, or any board, as Diane said, any board that's sort of saying, this has no value anymore. Whereas Susan's board saying this CCS is not of the same value to me anymore. You can say, but listen, look at this beautiful strategic plan, how they run operations. I think there's a good amount of optics.
Yeah, so what I like about the Jefferson County document that Sarah provided is that, like, the guiding principles to me are sort of separate. So they have who are we, which is like, I don't know, the mission and vision. I'm a little confused about what's the mission and what's the vision, but the who are we to me is like, this is the mission, this is how we do our work. And then, goals 1 through 5 to me would be analogous to like our strategic directions. So, their goal 1 is strengthen funding streams and fiscal viability, looking at, ways to bring in new funding sources, expanding partnerships, et cetera. But this sort of general fiscal responsibility and stewardship is in this like separate guiding principles section. I'd be happy to have a similar component. My concern about making it like one of our strategic, or put it in our mission statement, my concern about making it one of our strategic directions is then like, okay, so what are the goals? What are the activities here that are going to show that we are a fiscally responsible organization? Because it's so operational, right? Like in our strategic plan, I just don't know what I would add as a goal. And I could come up with something, but I feel like that, if we're not looking at, developing, like licensing Bob's code and developing alternate funding sources, et cetera, I fully agree that it is part of the way we do business. And I am 100% on board with documenting it and like putting it in a governing board approved thing that says this is the way we do things. But I would need some help with developing the objectives or targets or whatever we're going to call them to support it in in this plan. Like, I hear what you're saying, that like, yes, we need to be stewards of resources and make smart decisions. I just want to make sure we get it in the right place.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, if you look again at the Jefferson County document, you know, the first couple things that they have listed is, you know, investigating, expanding membership, you know, explore contractual services, those kinds of things. And, you know, so I guess, you know, from my viewpoint, those would kind of fall under that fiscal responsibility, in addition to, you know, just, we are just good stewards of the public money, or the, you know, the member library money. But, you know, it almost feels like this is, you know, this is the type of thing that's going to be in every strategic plan, you know, from now to the end of time. Obviously, you want to maintain that, or, you know, manage people's money correctly and in a responsible manner.
I wonder if we could make it more a goal in terms of being responsive to member circumstances, or something along those lines that you could turn into an actual goal or an objective at least. And I just think it's important to state it somewhere, as Catherine says, for optics, if no, for no other reason. But I also think there is always the possibility of bringing on something really big and cool and new, but it makes our overall costs go up. And that's a thing that I think we can't afford right now. So I think you need to kind of say that, that to contain costs and to keep looking at the future. And I don't know, I'm not wording it well because I didn't think it through well enough. So I can try to think of some better wording, but I just think it's important to say it somewhere. And it could just be in the context of, you know, being alert and looking at circumstances. Just because we're in a volatile time, it could even refer to that.
I feel like this is obviously one that is definitely going to have to be discussed at the governing board level as well, to potentially get some more feedback. But I would say from my viewpoint, I would like to see that fiscal responsibility bullet point in the suggested themes, you know, whatever that ends up looking like, or to get some additional feedback from governing board. But you know, and I think I am speaking for at least part of us here, that we all feel pretty strongly that this needs to be somewhere in this document, this discussion about fiscal responsibility. And you know, go ahead, Joe.
What I liked about the example that you had up was how they had guiding principles. So that, because I see that these goals in the strategic plan are all these are things we do, and that these guiding principles oversee everything else. You know, they're applied to everything else. They're embedded in all of the rest of the strategic plan. So if we're on the fence about incorporating it into goals, or what we have themes, then having this title of guiding principles might be a way of addressing that, or something like that. Does that make sense?
We've got Sarah with her hand up again.
That makes perfect sense. And to me, they're the values. I know when we did our strategic plan, we had our mission, vision, and values. So to me,
Yeah. I don't know if any of you have this, but whenever I'm in a Zoom meeting, after I say something, I always have to say, does that make sense? Because you're always looking at a bunch of blank faces because everybody's just kind of absorbing. Sorry, that was a total aside. But yeah, I think we also, I'd have to look again, but I think we have values in our strategic plan, and that's what guides all of the things that we put in the meat of the plan. I like that.
I'm going hunting for a document. I didn't leave the meeting. I'm just on the hunt.
What does everyone else think about having something similar to what Jefferson County has, or where we're, you know, where the values are spelled out, or our guiding principles, in addition to kind of the mission and vision, and then what are we calling it?
And I think also that's where you would put your equity piece, is it's a guiding principle.
And so if we create a separate guiding principles section, then I would just want to be sure that we show how it relates to the plan itself as the staff builds out their steps.
And we wouldn't have to call it guiding principles. We could come up with something else, or we could call it, our commandments or something, but
Maybe just leave it as values or whatever, Don't reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, maybe.
So CCS staff, we have a set of values on the way that we work with our members. And so these are intended to be very internal, how we work with each other. And then again, that's sort of customer service tenants more than anything else. But I would be happy to develop, change these to make them more about CCS as an organization, as a unit, and work these pieces in.
So Rebecca, are you suggesting then having, I think it was Joe or whatever said that we have another, or Karen, that we have another whole section of this plan that we haven't had in the past? It includes values or principles or whatever we want to call them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I'm hearing is that, whether it's about equity or fiscal responsibility, there's a desire to have a clear statement on how we make decisions, what matters to us when we're making decisions.
Mhm.
And to me, that makes sense to put in a principles or values section rather than trying to write a goal around them. We can still have goals about stewardship and fiscal responsibility, but I'm thinking about, I'm very selfish. I'm thinking about my evaluation, and I'm like, okay, so if I'm being evaluated against the work in the strategic plan, and we've got this fiscal responsibility goal, am I going to be evaluated, depending on who's on executive committee, based on whether member fees went down, member fees stayed the same, whether the auditor's happy, that I just didn't mess everything up, because we haven't had specific discussions about things like exploring contractual services. To me, that is saying reducing staff in CCS office and outsourcing to contractors. And that's not a discussion we've had. So to me, I'm not ready to write a strategic plan goal that would call for something like that. But I'd be very happy to have a set of guiding principles or values for our organization that say, we value the tax dollars that our members are giving us, and we're responsible for them, and we're going to make smart choices.
And those values or principles would be in every strategic plan in the future. Those would never change. You might adjust them a little bit, but they're the foundation on which you build the rest, which is all of those goals and all those, those. It's like the concept, and then the actual meat or the action is built on top of that. Makes sense to me.
Well, and frankly, as we think about inviting new members or talk about the value of being a part of CCS, that's something that I think they would want to see and know in terms of how we frame our thinking and our decision making.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like what we're working on, having a culture and what that culture is. That's kind of like the culture of CCS. This is the way it works, and these are how we intend to go forward in the future.
I think that Rebecca makes an interesting point as an executive director, how you craft your annual review document as one whose goal by their board was to have a new building built by 2023. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to write in 2020 or 2021 or 2022. But I think, you know, your narrative is that we renewed this lease. When we did that, we took this into consideration. I mean, it's not always that, it's not always a concrete thing. It's you just, I mean, you're in a challenging position because you have 27 bosses, but
Oh, 28.
28.
I don't want to forget anyone.
Yeah. So Karen probably has the most because Evanston is the biggest community. But I don't think that necessarily has to keep you up at night, how you draft that, because I think it's, like I said, I really do, but I think Karen makes it a really good point, is that, and Diane as well, with this idea of having our culture out there, or you know, if our culture was to, you know, to be the biggest consortium in the state of Illinois, then people would know that that meant a certain thing when they signed up to be part of the consortium, right? They would probably know that the primary drivers of activity would be places like Evanston, because those, if that's your goal, to be the biggest, right? You're just, but when you have a sort of a goal like this that just tells people how you respond, then I don't know, I think it's a good idea. I would also just, don't stay up at night worrying how you're gonna write your review.
I'm not worried about it this year, but you guys think about this all the time, right? Like, who's gonna end up on my board next year? My job could totally change based on who's gonna sit on executive committee. That's all. I'm not like actively anxious about this. There's plenty of other stuff for me to be worried about in the year 2020. So let's say we did have like a culture, values, guiding principles statement. I was just jotting notes while you all were talking, and I think we have an open question for governing board on diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we want that to be part of our culture, and you know, then later talking about what that looks with each component of the strategic plan. Stewardship and financial fiscal responsibility, loud and clear. I would add, based on you know, our survey results, that there's a value among the membership in shared decision making and in member engagement, or something along those lines. But I'm interested in, I mean, everyone seems pretty okay with having this additional component, but I'm wondering what you'd like, you know, if anything jumps out that we haven't talked about to include. And I also don't know if Sarah's got an old hand up or a new hand up.
That's an old one. I never lowered my hand. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So are you talking about what we would include in those values statements? Is that right, Rebecca? I mean, I do like the idea of the kind of, you know, shared decision making. I think that fits right into that whole idea of kind of how we do business. Here's our values, here's our kind of culture.
Sorry, my computer's doing some weird stuff. That's fine.
I mean, again, going back to Jefferson County, they did a really nice job with some of these. I mean, that they foster a culture of collaboration and community, that kind of thing. But
Like, we can just take theirs and plop them in. Like, that's fine with me.
some of the ones that we like. It's all about sharing, right?
Yeah. I mean, we provide professional development, training, and networking opportunities. We adopt technologies and services that will enhance the user experience. We practice fiscally responsible stewardship of member library resources. We engage all member libraries and respect their diversity. Like, yep, those sound good. We just don't do cooperative collection development. We're all on resource sharing.
do we feel like it might be okay to kind of borrow these for now as a way to present them to governing board, then to get some more feedback about that? I think that, again, why reinvent the wheel if we don't have to? These are all things that we're trying to do anyway. It's how you guys all do business. We all do business, but then maybe.
Yeah, haven't we been saying this for the last 8 months? We just keep borrowing from each other when we're trying to figure out what the heck we're doing.
But I mean, this at least gives us some points to start with for discussion at governing board.
Yeah.
Because this values component has not been part of previous long range plans. Am I correct? As one of the newer.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just kind of the starting point, saying, this came out of our discussions at the committee level, and we're really feeling that this meets a lot of our needs in terms of developing the strategic plan, both, kind of guiding what does CCS staff work on, but also as a document that we use to encourage members to join, or saying, here's why we're a great organization for you to be a part of. So maybe start with this as just the beginning, talking, or, kind of discussion points with governing board, and then, tweak from those discussions.
Just the smallest thing, but I prefer guiding principles over values, because I find the word values to have strong connotations.
I have no preference.
I like guiding principles. It's kind of like, the how we do business sort of thing, I guess.
I think that's good, guiding principles.
And is everyone okay with kind of, taking some of the stuff from the Jefferson County one, because it's things that we also do as well in our consortium, and at least having that be the starting discussion points at governing board? Okay.
Sure. I think it was a great find. Thank you to Sarah for bringing it.
Yes.
Sarah,
MVP.
you rock.
Oh, Pam, we can't hear you if you're talking to us.
Sorry. So where are we at right now with in terms of what you need from the committee, to prepare for governing board?
I think we're good with what I need now to help kind of the next step with the staff. So I guess the one clarifying point, so we're adding guiding principles. We've got fiscally responsible stewardship of member library resources. So we have a current suggested theme of develop flexible, responsive services that will continue to improve patron and staff experience. If we add something in there about, maintaining costs, or like making options, or something that like reflects that not everybody's going to want to be like, yeah, let's just like add this thing that's going to cost a bunch of money. Are we comfortable? And if we add in with like retaining current membership, do we still want another bullet for fiscal responsibility and cost, or are we happy with the guiding principle component?
I'm
Joe,
happy
you're
with
on
it just there somewhere. That's all I wanted.
Okay.
I prefer it being in principles.
Yeah, I agree.
Catherine, I know that you had some thoughts about the fiscal responsibility component. Are you okay with that showing up in the guiding principle statement, or do you feel like we need to have it more developed and spelled out in other areas?
I think I believe it should be a standalone unit in the strategic plan.
There's nothing preventing us from having it in both places, is there?
Well, I don't know why you would need it in both places. I mean, I'm assuming if you're going to have it in the main part of the strategic plan, there's going to be a lot more bullets or information, expanding on that and how you're going to achieve that and da da da. So I don't know why you would need to list it in guiding principles if you're going to make it a goal or a actual activity in your strategic plan.
I was just
only
gonna,
concern with putting it in both places is just developing the activities that are not operational activities. Because I feel like operationally it's a thing we do all the time, but when it comes to like, what are we like evaluating or changing or doing that's specific to this planning period, at this time, I don't know what that is. That is my only concern.
Makes sense.
And Sarah, were you going to say something as well?
Yeah, I agree that I don't think we need it in both places. You know, I'm very much.
You broke up, Sarah, or we can't hear you now.
I'm going to just jump in while Sarah's getting situated, but I'm not sure I understand why it would need to be in the, I know you explained it before, Catherine, but I'm not sure I still understand why it would need to be in the actual strategic plan as a theme or goal or whatever we're going to call it.
I think that what you're doing is you're saying that as you make decisions, you consider their financial repercussions, or their from a long-term and short-term point of view. So, for instance, Rebecca just mentioned giving options. That's that may or may not be cost-effective from the consortium as an entity, right? When you say only 6 people have to buy Collection HQ, you're making a financial choice to probably cost your institution, at the consortium as an institution, more, because you have to parse it out, because only it applies to these 6. So I think that it's important that institutions understand that when you provide, this is one example, is that if you, and I think it's more, it's not, they're not like, these are more what's going to go into your decision-making process about financial questions. That's how I think of it.
But how is that not something that guides you in your, I mean, how is that not a guiding principle?
I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying that when you spell it out, there's 6 of us on the call here, and we're all talking about being fiscally responsible in very different ways. And so if you have it as a unit of fiscal responsibility, it becomes clearer by what you mean. Obviously, we expect that, but I don't know. It's a personal preference, and I think it's more delineated what it means when you put it as a goal with objectives. What's going to go into your decision-making process about financial choices.
Okay. Thanks, that helped clarify it for me.
So maybe it needs to be in both places.
In both places, yeah.
Does Catherine's explanation, Rebecca, help you and your staff to think about what would be included under suggested themes, or what goals and objectives we would tie to that? Does that help?
I'm hearing Catherine say that writing out what makes a financially responsible decision would be helpful. And like, I understand, Catherine, what you're saying, like giving members choices isn't necessarily the most cost-efficient solution. That's not the question. I'm not sure that the strategic plan is the place that I'd write those criteria. I mean, I'm a little confused. Let's say we leave it in, I will think about it, and we meet again on November 30th. And then by that time, I'll have some draft objectives. And, you know, perhaps any of you have some objectives that you'd like to send to me via email. I'd be happy to include them for discussion at the next meeting. And we can go from there.
I think that sounds great. I think, and then, you know, like you said, Rebecca, you know, Catherine, if you've got specific examples that you know can help illustrate what you're getting at and what you were hoped to get out of the strategic plan, I think leaving it in both places, and we can all continue to think about it and think about, you know, where it makes the most sense. Does it need to be in both? What does it look like in both of those sections? You know, what's measurable, for example. Everyone's okay with that, leaving it in both places, and we'll continue the discussion on that at our next meeting. Okay, great.
Can I go back to one of Rebecca's questions about usage of data, helping members with data? I know you said it didn't come across very high priority, but every time I try and sign up for how to use data, or, you know, outside of taking Cornell's program on it or Harvard's program on data usage, I, you know, closed out. So I wonder if directors are not the people to ask about that, because we're just demanding of our teams, tell us why this is important, right? And they're the people trying to understand, what does it mean when 10 audiobooks are checked out? Do I measure that increase as a, you know, it's almost like statistics class. So like how to represent data, what it means. I feel, you know, I can just send my people everywhere, but I don't know, I feel that maybe we asked the wrong people that question, because whenever I say to my head of CERC, like, what does this mean? I get not the response I want, and then I go and I crunch the numbers and I get then I understand, you know, so I don't know, but I'd like to sort of somehow leave that in somewhere as a possible customer service. Maybe it's not in the strategic plan, but maybe it's in a offering or something somewhere down the road.
Yeah, I think we 100% agree on this. Like, I don't think it really popped up in the director's survey, but at least as strongly as I expected it to, but it's something we hear all the time that people have questions on and need help with. So I'm really comfortable leaving it in there and talking about ways we can help with that that's related to the ILS. Agreed.
So now, Rebecca, do you feel like you have enough to move forward, and then you know, we'll continue our discussions at the November 30th meeting, or is there anything else that you need from us from right now?
No, this is great. We'll do a couple of small revisions on here, just some wordsmithing based on what we talked about today. And then at the next meeting, we'll have draft targets or objectives. We'll also like have some solid words on what we're going to call the things, so we stop saying or whatever we're going to call them. Yeah, so I'll have a fresh document with the guiding principles and just the things that we're moving forward with, and we'll go from there.
Do we need to discuss, it was on your document, any long-term planning, or is that, we'll push that off for now?
I think we could talk about it next time. Really, I just wanted to acknowledge that there was, I think, a general consensus at governing board that we need, like, and even at this committee, we need our, like, here's what we got to do now plan, but also what are these big questions we need to answer in the future plan. So I think we're good just saying we agree with that, and we'll talk about it some more in the future.
Okay, just that we know that they're out there, and that's things we have to consider. Great. Okay, any other comments that we want to leave with Rebecca before we adjourn today, or does everyone feel like
they... great work? You're doing great.
Yeah, it's such a great job kind of pulling all those, like I said, disparate voices and you know, making something coherent out of us at governing boards sometimes. So great.
Just want to reassure people that I'm not drinking wine this early in the afternoon. When only 2 people live in a household, the dishwasher never gets full. We have no glasses. I was like running around the house. I need a
It's
glass.
vodka.
Really, I wish.
If there was ever a day to be day drinking these next few days, I think
Oh,
it's
God.
Oh my
this
God.
is it, right?
How many of you are a polling place tomorrow?
You're not. Oh, Sarah is.
Susan? Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
it's going to be
changed.
an interesting week.
Yeah.
We've been early voting, and of course, today is no early voting here. So that's what I was dealing with to make me had some irate people. Try to explain that we just are the location. Call the county if issues with it. But we'll be back tomorrow with 2 precincts here. So all-time high though on the early voting.
Yeah.
It was about almost 6 times what it was in March.
I just reworked all my schedules because I have a lot of people that have a 45-minute drive after we close, and I moved everybody that was going to be on a highway or a long drive. I moved them to the morning shift because I just don't want any of my people on the expressway after 4 o'clock tomorrow. So we'll see what's going to be.
Well, and the lines have been unbelievable. I waited at Mount Prospect Village Hall for an hour and a half on the first day, mid-afternoon, and we had a line like that on Saturday where it went from our front entrance down the driveway, down the parking lot, all the way to the street in front of our building. So it's been crazy.
Yeah. Well, here's my mask that I've been wearing lately.
Well, that was one of the problems on Saturday. We had someone wearing a Trump mask.
Oh.
And the election judges told the person they couldn't be within 100 feet of the building, and she didn't like that. And they gave her a paper mask so she could vote, but yeah, no.
It's unfortunate that it took the last 4 years to get more people to vote. I've never understood low voter turnout, but
I think what will be
the
interesting
new year.
if we really do crack the 50%, right? I mean, when you think about it, the last election was 50% of the people that could vote voted. And so you won if you got 25.2%. So I don't know if it's actually, if these are all just the regular people like that always vote and we just got it over early. I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if that 50% marker really moves up or not.
I hope it does.
All right. Well, since I'm not hearing any more discussion about our strategic plan, I'm going to officially adjourn and wish everyone good luck tomorrow and the rest of the week. But we'll adjourn at 3:02 p.m. And then our next meeting, just a reminder, is November 30th. Sorry, I did that in the opposite direction. Is November 30th, and we all, I believe, said that date was okay. So we'll have a couple more people, hopefully, the other 2 people.
Well,
So
happy
I guess,
holidays, everybody.
yeah.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Rebecca, let us know if you need
Stay
additional
safe.
information from us in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, absolutely. Good luck
All right.
tomorrow.
Take care, everyone.